seat, Dylan. Thank you, buddy. All right, so thank you for everybody for coming to my talk. My name's Andrew Claassen. I'm a local mycologist. I study the Mount Shasta area a lot, and all the way down to Chico and all over California. You can feel free to add my socials, ask me, mushroom ID questions, anything like that, if you need it. So this is Introduction to Mushroom Hunting in Northern California. I'm just going to give like a basic overview of the ecology of the mushrooms that we have kind of in the Mount Shasta, Redding, Northern California area, so you guys have a good idea of where to go find these mushrooms. Some of them are edible, some of them are great to take photos of, but just interacting with mushrooms in general is what we want to be doing every day. So some of you might be asking, what are mushrooms? Because there's a lot of misconceptions, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Some people think they're plants. They're actually the fleshy, fruiting bodies of fungi, which typically grow from the soil or above in trees. So if you might think of like a mold, something like that, that's another type of fungi, but they typically don't have fruiting bodies in the same way that mushrooms typically do. You might be asking, are most mushrooms poisonous to eat or touch? The answer is no. Most mushrooms have an edibility status that's unknown, but only around 1 to 3% of mushrooms are truly toxic. And many of these mushrooms can be rendered edible when cooked, but are deadly toxic when raw. Morels, for instance, I don't know if anybody heard, but last year there was an incident at a sushi restaurant in Oregon, and some people died from eating raw morels. So if you're hunting morels this weekend, make sure you be careful, cook them all the way through. You can't really overcook a morel. In my opinion, the more you cook them, the better they taste, so it's good to know. You might be asking, are good edible mushrooms common? Around 4 to 5% of mushrooms are considered like choice edibles, and there's a lot of edibles that are not classically eaten, stuff like hygrophorus. And one quick note before I go past it, I want this to be like a conversation. This isn't professor time. This is, anytime you have a question, just like scream it at me and I'll answer, and I'll do my best to answer it. You might be asking, should I pluck or cut mushrooms? This is one of the huge things on the Facebook groups that people just go on and on and on and on about, but we have lots of studies over time. We have multiple intensive studies over long periods of time that have shown that the method of harvest, whether you're plucking them, cutting them, doing whatever, it doesn't impact the future harvests. However, disturbing the mycelium and moving around spores and picking up mushrooms and walking around with them has been proven to be helpful in helping them in their reproductive cycles. You also might be wondering, since there's so many mushrooms out there, how common is it to find a new mushroom species? And I'm here to tell you that California has the highest diversity of organisms, including mushrooms, of any U.S. state. So I usually find like a new species like once a week, something like that, maybe even every day, depending on where I'm going, depending on how understudied the habitat is, and depending on what trees are around. You might be asking, why do we use the Latin names? Why are they so complicated? What's the deal with them? But in taxonomy and in all biological study, Latin names are preferred as it dissolves the language barriers between scientists in different countries, and it allows us for better specificity when we're talking about species. Latin's a dead language, so you can kind of say them however you want. Some people think you need to say them a certain way, but it's a dead language. If we were really all pronouncing them like how they would be in Latin, we would be putting an emphasis on different vowels, kind of like how you do when you speak Italian. So you might be asking, what are the basic tools of mushroom hunting? I have a camera right here. This is an Olympus TG4. This is a really good entry-level, super easy to use camera. It takes focus stacked photos, which is where it takes a stack of 15 photos at different focus lengths, so you get like a whole 3D kind of like looking image from the thing. Cell phone's always good to have. It's good to have an extra battery pack if you're out far and you don't want your phone to die so you can get back. Navigation and property line maps like Onyx and Gaia are really good. I use those a lot for seeing like, if I'm on a national forest property or if I'm on state forest or national forest and there's somebody's property, I want to be able to see where that border is, so I'm not, possibly walking into a, getting shot situation. Mushroom knives are good to have if you like to cut mushrooms or if you like to clean them and eat them. Hiking shoes, it's really easy to roll your ankle out here, especially on the slope of Mount Shasta. The dirt's really loose, there's lots of rocks. Have your set of eyes, more than one set is preferable. The more eyes you have out there, the more people you have with you, the more fun it is, and also, the more mushrooms you're probably going to end up taking home with you. Make sure you got water, a backpack, paper bags, or a basket. I have a UV flashlight here, which are good for identifying Cortinarius, and you can play around with other mushrooms, but it's good for identifying web caps or Cortinarius. And then, if anybody doesn't have iNaturalist right here, this is an incredible app to have. It has an AI system in it that will suggest stuff to you. It's not right a lot of the time, but it'll give you some kind of idea as to maybe what genus that mushroom may be in, or maybe what family it might be in, and then you can do more research from there to try and figure out what the rest of it is. So I highly recommend you downloading iNaturalist. It's incredible. There's a QR code if you want to scan it. I'll leave it up for a second. Go for it.
You would take pictures of it then, under, over.
Yeah, so it's good to get all angles. It's good to get the cap, so you get the cap color. It's good to get a shot of the gills and the stipe. You can do chemical testing with different chemicals called, you can do KOH, and there's a few other ones that you can use to identify certain mushrooms. Quartz and boletes often use KOH for it. So yeah, you just upload the photos there and see what the AI thinks what might be going on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you're taking the pictures, do you ever put anything like a quarter or something to get the size comparison?
Yeah, I use different stuff for scale, and usually what I'll do is I'll be out and somebody leaves a piece of trash, they leave a little washer ring from a nut bolt set or something. I'll just take that and I'll throw it in my tackle box, and then when I come up on a mushroom, I'll put it there for scale. Quarters are good, coins are good because everybody knows the size. I like big lighters. Rulers are good, bring rulers, because if you find something new that might be, you might want to have scale or measurements so that you can give that to a mycologist and they can study it properly. So yeah. So in mushroom hunting, we have two main ecological lifestyles of mushrooms. We have mycorrhizal mushrooms, which for some reason that's cut off at the top. But we have mycorrhizal mushrooms, and these are mushrooms that form associations with plants via their root system. All the mushrooms that you're going to be finding that are mycorrhizal are going to be what we call ectomycorrhizal fungi that actually penetrate the root system of trees themselves. And then they create a relationship there that's mutually beneficial. And the fungi share micronutrients in plants. The fungi share micronutrients that the tree species or the plant species cannot get as easily. And then the plants share photosynthates like lipids and sugars with the mycorrhizal mushrooms in exchange. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. These fungal networks assist plants in obtaining more water as well, and they're crucial for the health and survival of many plant species. Mycorrhizal fungi have a highly expansive underground network of mycelium, and they spread by spore as well. So they've got two kind of different strategies of moving around. Go for it.
It's not just one mushroom in one tree. How large of an area can be the same plants, or where everybody's talking to everybody?
I don't know. I mean, the networks are highly expansive, so I don't really think it's really difficult to study those mycorrhizal systems. You've got to dig up a lot of dirt, trace them, make measurements. And then our other type of mushrooms we have are saprophytic mushrooms. These are decomposing mushrooms. They break down organic matter into high quality soil. We would not be alive if it were not for these. We would be absolutely buried in plant material. Up to, none of us would be alive. They grow on a variety of substrates. They grow on soil, wood, animal dung, algae, lichen, moss, bones, sometimes even plastic. And they excrete specialized enzymes in order to break down their organic material. And so yeah, there's a lot of mycorrhizal mushrooms out here, and there's a lot of saprophytic mushrooms. You can kind of, after you start mushroom hunting for a while, you can kind of notice, you know, how close is this to a certain tree, like maybe a fir or something, and then you kind of extrapolate, maybe this is mycorrhizal, maybe this is saprophytic. But it's good to learn the mushrooms by genus, because genera themselves are often, this isn't always true. There's sometimes, you know, ones that saprophytically associate, meaning that they have a relationship with a certain tree, where they've evolved alongside that tree species or that plant species to break down its plant matter. And then the mycorrhizal mushrooms, you know, they're in that more intimate relationship with the plants, you could say.
How do you spell it?
Spell which one?
The one that's blocked out.
It's MyCoorrhizal.
I'm insane, I think it's that bulb, that projector's hitting that.
Well, we'll definitely want to move that for the other speakers.
Is there,
Oh, great.
is that globally?
Is
So
what?
there's two different types.
Yeah, this is a
That's
global. This is a global thing. Yeah.
So like, there's one that gives like a reciprocity, and then there's one that decomposes.
Yep. Exactly.
So any mushroom that's found on a dead tree, the log that's down would be saprophytic.
It's possible that it could be a parasite. So like, there's stuff like Armillaria malea, or the honey mushroom, that can kind of grow like saprophytically, but it's also a parasite on trees. It kills trees. So there's different lifestyles. Fungi are incredibly complex. I'm just trying to like give you the general overview.
So the overview, there's two types, or now
There's more types than that, but in general mushroom hunting, if you're doing it for, you know, edible mushrooms, those are going to be your two main.
So you're saying that both of those are edible?
No, not necessarily. These are just ecological lifestyles of fungi.
I got you.
Yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so, moving on to the trees, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the trees that we have around here that are your common, like, mycorrhizal or saprophytic associates of fungi. Here we have, these are true firs or aves. There's a lot of these around here. We have Aves magnifica shastensis, and this one grows at higher elevations on Mount Shasta Slope and out by Medicine Lake, stuff like that. And then we have Aves concolor. This is the white fir, and it grows at lower elevations. It can grow at higher elevations too, but mostly at the lower elevations. This is like your classic Christmas tree that you buy at a parking lot. And then we have oaks. These are what we call quercus. And there's a lot more of these around here than I threw on screen, but you know, these are some of the main types we have in Reading. We have Quercus wislezenii. This is the interior live oak. It's the ones with if you walk around with bare feet in the oak woodlands and you start getting poked, that's a Quercus wislezenii. And we have Quercus lobata, called lobata because it has these lobes on the edges of the leaf. And there's a lot of mycorrhizal mushrooms that associate with them as well as saprophytic mushrooms. And then we have Quercus collagii. This is the California black oak. There's a lot of interesting cortinarias that associate with these, and some interesting hygrophorus, wax caps. And so, yeah, those are some of the oaks we have. And then we have our pines in the Shasta area. We have three main species of pines. There's a couple others that occur rarely, but we have Pinus contorta. This is the lodgepole pine. They grow at higher elevations out by Medicine Lake. And matsutake, if you know those, they associate with the Pinus contorta, the lodgepole pine. And there's lots of other mycorrhizal mushrooms that associate with them. We have ponderosa pine at the lower elevations. This is like that very large pine tree that you see if you're driving down 89. That's the one that you see. And then we have Pinus jeffreyi, or the Jeffrey pine. And these two look very similar, but the difference that I want to distinguish to you right now is the color of the bark on this. We don't have a color of the bark here, or we don't have a picture of the bark here, but it's more of like a gray-brown color. And these grow at a little bit of a higher elevation. Sometimes you find the ponderosa pine and Jeffrey pine growing with each other in those in-between elevations. but it's another mycorrhizal associate. Boletus rex varus, or the spring king bolete, or the porcini that you see a lot around here at the fair. They associate with those and with the firs. So, and the morels associate with them sometimes as well. And then this is Calocedrus decurrens. This is one of our less common mycorrhizal associates. There are some mushrooms that mycorrhizally associate with them and saprophytically associate. For instance, I found an inosity, or a fiber cap, last year that came back as a new species to science. It's just, it has a code name and it's not described yet. But this is the incense cedar. See those a lot around here. They kind of have a redwood kind of looking bark almost. And now we'll move on to some mushrooms. We're gonna get straight to it. Everybody comes to the McCloud Mushroom Festival for morels and porcini, so we're just gonna go straight to those. This is Morchella americana, or the American yellow morel. This has a very wide distribution in the United States. They grow typically in like soggy river bottoms with cottonwood trees, if you know how to identify those. They grow with the cottonwood trees and with the Oregon ash trees, which is Fraxinus latifolia. These are a good morel. They're not like the best in terms of flavor, but I still like to eat them. They're very pretty, you know, like every mushroom. So yeah. And you've all seen this one. We have a tangerine for scale here. This is Morchella snyderi, or the natural black morel. This is kind of the most common morel that we have around here in McCloud, Mount Shasta. And it associates with the pine trees and with the fir trees as well. So usually I don't target these, but they are tasty and they're probably my favorite morel to eat. And I just kind of find them by accident while I'm looking for other stuff, to be honest. They're around. You just gotta keep a sharp eye out. Go for it.
Yeah, I was wondering, does the flavor change as you go and find them in different regions? Can you tell?
Like between species or between like age?
Like morels they find here versus down south.
Like these are a little different. Yeah, so there's definitely a flavor profile difference.
Yeah.
These are a little bit more, I would say these are a little bit more bland. The snyderi are a little bit more intense in flavor.
I think he was saying in different regions, if you find a black morel here compared to in Oregon.
Oh, no, they all taste the same.
They do.
Yeah, they all taste the same. Sometimes you'll find cool stuff, like sometimes you'll see them with like a pink tone to them, so that's kind of cool.
Is color the main difference between those two species?
There's a few differences. So here we have the blonde morel, and the color's a lot different here, and we also have some cracking on the stipe and some like orangish red bruising that can happen with the Americana. But the main difference here is color and ecological association. So the trees that they're with, the habitat that they're in. These like to grow in like river bottoms down south in Redding and in Oregon at lower elevations. So yeah, there's a lot of differences. And often these Morchella snyderi will have, at the bottom of the stipe, if you cut it, the bottom of the stipe will be like stuffed full of mycelium or full of hyphae, and normally the stipes are like completely hollow. But if you cut it off at the bottom, it'll be like kind of full of stuff. So yeah. Alright, go for it.
So you have to boil it for a while?
No, you don't have to boil it, just cook it for a while.
Like how long?
I would say like safe is like 10 minutes. Did I see another hand back there? So yeah, Morchella snyderi, natural black morel. You'll find a bunch of them if you walk around in the woods. Here's a cute picture of my dog with one. And my friend Salem. We found those the other day by accident, so that was fun. We've been eating a bunch of them all week. And then this is an undescribed species of morel. I thought I'd just throw this one in for fun. I found this one this week. It's only got 10 observations on iNaturalist, so it's not very well documented, but it's probably an undescribed species. When you do DNA analysis on these mushrooms, for some mushrooms, one gene site is enough to get the identity of that mushroom, or for it to be able to tell you that it's unknown. But with these, with morels in general, the gene site that's normally used is not sufficient to be able to get enough info about it. And so this is a new species of morel. This is This occurs in Mount Shasta, and for right now we're calling it Morchella CF magnispora. The CF means like compare with. Magnispora is a species that was described from Turkey, so all the way across the world. There's a few morphological differences, or there's a few morphological similarities, but this is probably going to be an undescribed species right now. So it's going to get what we call like a provisional name or a code name while it's waiting. So
when you come across a new species like that, or something you can't identify, but that's pretty clearly a morale, right?
yeah, it's a morel.
Do you eat it?
I would be interested in maybe eating one, but maybe after we find more of their habitat. You know, I did collect some of these for DNA analysis, but we're gonna need to run like 5 different gene sites on them to be able to really, I mean, and even then, like, who really knows? Like, the general thing with mushrooms is like we add names to stuff, but like we're just trying our best. Like, humans are stupid. We're really stupid.
So I'm gonna go with no.
Yeah. What's that?
I said I'm gonna go with no.
And then here we have, this is what some people call a false morel, but I think that's a really horrible name for it. This is what we call a Gyromitra. This is Gyromitra montana, or the snowbank false morel. These are edible if you cook them well, similarly to the morels, but not all Gyromitra are edible. Some of them are extremely toxic. They contain monomethylhydrazine, which is actually a rocket fuel that NASA uses. So it's pretty crazy. But this is an edible one. It's pretty good. It's not my favorite. It's not as good as a morel. Some people like it better than morels. But they associate with the fir trees up at higher elevations. If you go to the snow line, these like to hang out around like where the snow bakes are starting to melt. So these are cool. And then this is toxic Gyromitra species. This one needs further DNA analysis to really know what it is, but we think that these Gyromitra that are toxic in the PNW are probably going to be either Gyromitra splendida or Gyromitra venenata, or maybe an undescribed species. There's a bunch of different ones with code names, but this is the one that contains monomethylhydrazine, that rocket fuel that NASA uses. And so, yeah, this is one to look out for. Make sure that you're telling the difference between these two. These are normally a whole lot more chunky, and they grow up with the snow line. These are typically a bit smaller. They have a bit of a thinner stipe. They're kind of more globular on the top, whereas these are kind of just like one big chunk out of the ground.
I was gonna ask you that one, right? You want to cook that outside, or at least like when you do cook it, you want to open up your windows, right?
I've heard different opinions about it. I've heard different. I've heard different opinions about it, and I don't really know what the deal is with them. I've heard that about Verpas too, about the hollow, about the Verpas. So, yeah.
So you say acid jet fuel, does that mean like they literally use that, or it's the same chemical?
It's the same chemical, so they're not deriving it from these.
Cool.
They said that would be cool, but I think that's not cost effective. I would think not.
Maybe you could launch one of these?
I mean, maybe if you do this.
Oh, we just lost you.
Oh, what the heck?
You're back.
Oh, there we go. Now we're back.
Now,
All right.
are these found in this area?
Yeah, these are found in this area. So this I found near Whiskeytown Lake, in a wood chip pile on the side of the road. And then these you find up here in Mount Shasta. Go for it.
Does that second one have a hollow stipe?
Yeah, it does. It does have a hollow stipe. Some of them don't have hollow stipes. They're a little bit hollow. We need to do more analysis on these to really like know what we're working with. So. And then here we have, this is Boletus rexvaris, or the spring king bolete. This is a really popular edible around here, probably the second most popular edible after the morels. These associate mycorrhizally with the Pinus ponderosa, Pinus jeffreyi, so the Jeffrey pine, the ponderosa pine, the white firs, and then the red firs at higher elevations. So this is a really good edible. I like to eat these raw. They're completely safe to eat raw. Some mushrooms you need to cook them all the way through, but this is not one of them. Some people, because of Mushroom cell walls being made up of a material called chitin, which is the same. It's the same material that shellfish make their shells out of, so lobsters and stuff like that. It can give people a GI upset. So if you get bubble gut easily, I wouldn't recommend eating it raw, but I like to eat them raw best. They're good for salads and stuff. Want to clean them well. They're often full of bugs, but if there's bugs in them, I just dry them and save them for later. I cut out the bugs and I eat the fresh small ones. Here's another photo of them. These are a little younger. These are maybe some that I might eat raw. And then here we have another bolete. This is Butyroboletus primiregius, or the spring butter bolete. This is the butter bolete that we have up here. They're called butters because their texture is very much like butter when you cook them. These are blue staining mushroom, and another piece of misinformation that goes around a lot on the interwebs is that any blue staining mushroom you want to stay away from. That's absolutely not true. There's some blue staining mushrooms that probably wouldn't be a good idea to eat, but this is not one of them. These are really delicious. A lot of people like them better than porcini. I'm a porcini fan myself, so that's not me, but these associate with the fir trees up at higher elevations.
What does blue staining mean?
So you can see right here, maybe a little bit. The screen isn't awesome, but there's a little bit of like blue staining. So when you like touch the mushroom, its flesh changes color, and that's chemicals in the flesh of the mushroom oxidizing. So, or polymerizing, depending on what type of mushroom. So, yeah. And then this is Tricholoma murrellianum, or the Western matsutake. You might have heard of matsutake before. They're a very prized culinary mushroom in Japan. But the one that they have there is in the same genus Tricholoma, but it is not the same species, in fact. And the populations over in Japan have actually become very endangered, and because they've been over-harvested. So a lot of the matsutake that they eat in Japan is actually imported from North America. These grow from California all the way up into Canada, British Columbia. So they're around. They're in Alaska too. My friend Hernan found some in Alaska. And the way you can tell these is they're always going to have like gray soil at the bottom of their stipe. They've got red staining, as you can see right here, and then they've got a partial veil. They've got a partial veil here on the stipe that once that mushroom opens up in its gills and its spores mature, the spores drop, and these are really hardy. So if you ever pick a matsutake, you're going to be like, wow, this thing is super dense, because you can throw them against a tree and you might break the edge of the cap off, but like if you hold the stipe and try and like crush it, it's pretty much impossible. But these are really popular to eat. I don't really like them. A lot of people like them. To me, they just taste like dirt. But they smell really good. They smell similar to like big red gum, if you've had that. Or some people think they smell like dirty socks. I've smelled a few, and they generally smell like pretty different from each other. So yeah, go for it.
Is that the one when you cut and it's like the little milk comes out?
No, that's a lactarius.
That's a different one?
Yeah.
And this one is the best for pickling, right? Like they get crunchy when you soak them, right?
I don't know about that. A lot of people, most people, the traditional way to cook these is generally to steam them in rice with sake. Yeah, but people eat them all sorts of different ways. They're good. Like, I mean, I don't like them, but I can say what I know other people like. Some people like to brush like Japanese barbecue sauce on them and then grill them on the grill. So, yeah.
A little bit off topic, but
Sure.
when you dry mushrooms, do you use a dehydrator or you just put it outside? Or?
I use a dehydrator. In Reading, it's so hot and dry outside that I could just leave it on my windowsill. But if you're ever out in the forest and you want to dehydrate a mushroom, just put it on your dashboard. Yeah, dashboards work great.
We live in Florida, so what do you do with humidity? Is there any difference?
Yeah, there's a lot of difference. You got to get a dehydrator, or put it in your oven.
Okay.
Oven at a low temp.
What's low?
As low as you can get it. I mean, I run my dehydrator at 113 degrees, which is a little hotter than I'd like to, but it doesn't go down lower than that. So, yeah. Cool. And then here's a up-close shot, so you can see the red bruising. This is what we call an enrolled margin of the cap, where it kind of like curves over on itself. That's indicative of Matsutake. And yeah, these were associating with the red firs up at higher elevations on Mount Shasta slope. And this is like kind of a look-alike for a Matsutake. Some people might think it is. I think it looks pretty different, but I thought I'd show it anyway. This is what we would call an imperial cat, or a Catapthelasma, or a Catapthelasma species. These mycorrhizally associate with the Sitka spruce on the coast, and they associate with, I think, a few other trees. But you can see they've got this partial veil here. They've got this long taproot-like stipe, kind of like a carrot, kind of similar to the Matsutake. You can see they've got those long stipes as well. But these don't really bruise red that often. This one's kind of bruising red a little bit. But the main difference you can tell here is there's going to be no cinnamon smell. There's going to be no big red gum, dirty sock smell. No, do you know what these smell like? I can't remember.
Farinaceous.
Farinaceous, so cucumber.
Really flowered.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are edible, but I don't know a lot of people who do. And the gills on these are decurrent, which is not true about the Matsutake. Decurrent means that the gills start to go down the stipe. And then here we have, this is an agaricus in section Xanthodermate. This is what we would call like a yellow stainer. We find these a lot with the oak trees down in Redding. We find them up here too sometimes. But this is a mildly toxic mushroom. I hear some people can eat them, and they smell, if you know the smell of phenol, often you'll smell these mushrooms too before you find them, but it's another white mushroom. It's one to look out for because they look a lot like those button mushrooms from the store. So good to look out for these. They usually turn yellow when you touch them. That's why they're called a yellow stainer. And then after a while of being stained yellow, they'll turn this kind of like brown, cracked kind of color on the top. So watch out for these, mildly toxic. Go for it.
I'm from Russia. We actually eat those.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're supposed to boil them for like 5-10 minutes with salt, and it takes the toxicity out. And then,
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Cool.
It's slightly different. But
Maybe I'll have to try it. Maybe I'll have to try it.
it's the same family as the buttons, right? But
Yep. Yeah, it's in the section, or it's in the genus Agaricus. Yeah. And this is a Russula brevipes, or a short-stemmed Russula. This is a brittle gill mushroom. We find these all over the place, all over California. They associate with lots of different types of trees, mycorrhizally. Some people eat these, but I don't really find them that appealing. Some people think they're kind of like shellfish-y, seafood-y. I find them to kind of taste like chalk. Not my favorite. Not my favorite. So, yeah, that's another one. And then this is the result of, so believe it or not, this mushroom right here and this mushroom here are partially the same thing. This is what we call Hypomyces lactiflorum, or a lobster mushroom. These are not my favorite edible, but a lot of people like them. They're kind of, in my opinion, almost like a lobster-flavored subpar potato. They're not my favorite, but a lot of people like them. So what happens here is, this is the mushroom that it starts out with. This is the Russula brevipes. And what happens is an ascomycete, which is a different type of fungus, shoots spores out, and they infect these mushrooms, and they convert 90% of their mass into this other species, into this Hypomyces lactiflorum, in order to spread their spores. So these are really popular edible. Like I said, not my favorite, but I pick them for other people. I pick a lot of mushrooms for other people.
usually, if you find this, they're like a whole bunch of big family, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. We often find them in big groups. Yeah, and the same thing with the Russula brevipes. We find those in big groups too. They're not very solitary. They like to hang out with each other.
Is this one grows under the leaves, right? Like mostly hiding under the leaves? No.
Sometimes. I mean, I found that one and it was not hiding, so.
Do you find lobsters in this area or just coastal?
You know, I never have, but I've heard some documentation out by Bernie. So towards Bernie Falls, that area. So I don't know, it might be worth looking. And then this is one of our chanterelles. This is one that we have on the coast. We don't really find it in this area too much, but if you go over to like Humboldt or Delaware County or anywhere up through the Pacific Northwest, up through Oregon, Washington, this is the Pacific Golden Chanterelle. It's one of my favorite edible mushrooms. Chanterelles are really hard to beat. I would say that they're probably tied with morels for me. These mycorrhizally associate with Sitka spruce trees over on the coast. And also, I think they associate with the tan oak as well. There's tan oak in this photo as well, these leaves right here. So it's a nice big yellow mushroom, really easy to identify. They have these decurrent yellows that go down the stipe. So they're pretty easy to identify and they're a choice edible. Definitely go out and find them. Yeah.
Is it true that worms don't eat chanterelle?
I've never seen one eat. Yeah, I've never seen bugs in one. Have you ever seen bugs in a chanterelle? No?
Yeah, but not here.
Yeah, not here.
What? Do you know why?
Probably acidity or toxicity.
Probably have some inhibitory agent that kills insect network.
Yeah.
Schools, the silverjacks definitely do that. It's been isolated, but the chanterelles probably something to do with that.
Cool. And then this is another species of chanterelle. This is one that we have pretty commonly in Mount Shasta. They found these on the Mount Shasta slope. This is Cantharellus subalbidus, or the white chanterelle. These are really good too. They're a little bit more dense, typically than they're a little bit more dense than this other species, and they're typically a bit smaller in stature. But in my opinion, the flavor is a bit better. I like it when mushrooms don't have as much water in them, because I like to do what I call a dry sear, where you don't use any oil first. You just throw the mushroom in the pan, cut up, and let all the water burn off, and then you throw in oil after that. So these take less time to burn off all the water, which is nice.
Why do you like it? Why do you like it?
Oh, just because I like mushrooms crispy.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that paper?
What's up?
What's that paper?
Oh, this is, so I used to work for this thing called the Fungal Diversity Survey, where we like document new mushrooms for science. And this is like a barcode tag, and it has a QR code here. So when someone scans this image, it'll take them right to the associated iNaturalist observation. So that's the online documentation on a public forum. So yeah, that's what that is. Sometimes I'll write my name down here, and then there's a ruler here to show like the scale, size. In case it's a new mushroom, it's good to have scale in the photo.
Forgive me if you already addressed this, but are you relying on iNaturalist as your source when you're discovering new species, or do you have other resources?
No, it's good to look at the literature. It's good to look at scientifically published papers. iNaturalist is a fun tool, but it can only do so much. And it's good to ask, you know, your expert mycologists that you know. Often mycologists will focus on like a genus or two, or 5, or I don't know. Some people focus on everything, but some people focus on a few things to study. So it's good to ask experts if you know them.
Yes, I have to ask.
Oh, and these associate with the Abies magnifica, the red fir up on Mount Shasta. And this is what some people will call like a look-alike for a chanterelle. This is Turbinellus floccosus, or the scaly chanterelle. I don't like the common names, but I have to use them because, I don't know, people like it or something, I don't know. But this is Turbinellus floccosus. My friend Alan Rockefeller wanted to see if these were edible or not, because they're listed in all the field guides as like mildly toxic. And they were selling them at an open air market in Mexico, so he went there and got some. And they gave him horrible diarrhea. So, wouldn't recommend eating those. They're another mycorrhizal mushroom, so they associate with a variety of different trees. This is the reason why we have so many genus names over here is because there's been so many papers on it, and I haven't read them all, so I don't know. But this is what we would call like a wood fluid. This is a purple mushroom. They smell kind of like orange juice concentrate that you get from the grocery store. And they associate mycorrhizally with a variety of trees. So yeah, they're nice to find. A lot of people don't like them, but I think they're really good. They've got a nice strong flavor. They do really good in like broths, soups, ramens, stuff like that. This is a Grossebi praecox group. This is like what we call a group species because you get so much variation in the DNA sequencing that what you really have going on here is like a bunch of different species. But this is a really common like mulch lawn mushroom. You find them in cities all the time, just on the side of the road and wood chips of businesses and stuff. Some people like to eat these. I don't like to eat them. They're kind of gross. I think they kind of taste like grass clippings, but I guess sometimes people find a rare one that like tastes good or something. I don't know. But it's a good little brown mushroom to be aware of if you're foraging in an urban environment. They grow sometimes up here too in the mountains, but very rarely. And here we have, this is Amanita muscaria var fabula levata. A lot of people just call this Amanita muscaria, but really what it is in America we have a different subspecies of Amanita muscaria that we call fabula levata. And you can see on the ring here, there's some yellow staining. And that occurs with this species that we have here in America. These mushrooms are listed in a lot of field guides as like deadly toxic, but I honestly I think there's only been one documented case, or maybe 2 documented cases of someone actually dying from this mushroom. Depending on how you process it, you can either dehydrate it until it's dry like a cracker, or you can boil it once in water, and then you get a psychoactive effect from consuming this mushroom. It's fully legal. There's nothing illegal about this mushroom. I would recommend being very careful though. A lot of people don't like this. Don't try it. Just don't try it. There's a chemical in it that needs to be decarboxylated or changed in order for you to get the psychoactive effect without the toxic effect. And that decarboxylation process removes the toxic chemical, which is ibotenic acid. And that's very degenerative to the brain. It's very dangerous. So you don't want to mess around with these, and they're honestly not worth it, but they're very beautiful. They associate with a variety of different trees. They associate with eucalyptus trees, Sitka spruce trees, lots of different tree species. They're actually invasive in Australia and New Zealand, so they're kind of a problematic mycorrhizal mushroom in some areas, but you know, it's the most iconic mushroom in the world. Everyone knows it from Mario. So,
What's the problem with them growing where they're not wanted?
so they're not in every habitat, there's mushrooms that fulfill ecological niches because they've co-evolved alongside all the other organisms in that space. And so when you have an invader species, when you have something that comes from another part of the world, and it fills a niche that something else fills, it could be pushing that mushroom out of its habitat and possibly endangering its existence.
Have you ever seen those in the Reading area?
Yeah, there's a patch of them that I check on every November and I harvest them. Yeah. If you want, I can show you where it is.
It only comes in red, right? Because I've seen them in yellow.
No, sometimes they're yellow. Sometimes they're yellow, and I've even seen like some albino ones that are devoid of color. This is another really common lawn mushroom, wood decayer. This is Condyliomyces condylianus, or the pale brittle stem. I found these growing on wood. They're a really common lawn mushroom. They're edible, but they're really watery. They have no fibrous substance to them, so if you put them in a pan, they'll just turn into water and be nothing. But it's a good mushroom to be aware of. They pop up in lawns a lot. They fruit like all times of the year, even when it's like 100 degrees out. I've seen them, so they're pretty hardy. Interesting mushroom to know about. Very common, very common. And this is another lawn type of mushroom that we have. This is a saprophytic, so this is a decomposer. It's a sapphirella, or a brittle stem. Sapphirella longipes, or the tall brittle stem. I see these a lot in the Reading area with the oak trees, so they may have some sort of decomposer ecological niche that they're filling there. These aren't really like a good edible, but they're good to be aware of because they're around. So yeah. This is Psilocybes cyanescens. I'm not going to say anything else about it. You can look it up on your phone and talk to me about it later. And this is another really choice edible. This is a great one. This is, if anybody knows Dr. Gordon Walker, fascinated by fungi, this is his favorite mushroom. This is Amanita villosa, the springtime amanita. They associate with the interior live oak trees in Redding and in the Bay Area and all throughout California. We find tons of them. They even grow in the mountains sometimes with black oak trees, but not as commonly as with the live oak trees. So this is a great edible species. But there is one toxic lookalike, and that's kind of what scares a lot of people out of eating these mushrooms, but I'm going to show you the difference right now. So this is the toxic lookalike. This is Amanita ocreata, or the Western Destroying Angel. And you can see here it has a really bulbous base stipe. This is what we call the vulva of an amanita. Amanitas are mushrooms that hatch out of these eggs that develop underground. But there's a few key differences between these mushrooms. You can see these are entirely white on the cap. They don't have any sort of consistent peachy coloring to them. And also there's it's lacking this thing that we call a striate margin. So on the edge of the cap, there will be little lines where the gills are poking through the little cuticle of the cap. And we see that right here. You can see the gills are kind of poking through here on the edge of the cap. So that's what we call a striate margin, and that does occur in Amanita villosa, but it does not occur in Amanita ocreata. So that's one difference. And then if you cut these in half, down the stipe, they'll be solid, fleshy. There won't be any sort of like hollowness to them. There won't be any sort of like pith going on. But if you cut these open, they have a hollow stipe. And this is the number one identifying factor for Amanita villosa. If you find an Amanita because sometimes the cap coloration on these is not consistent either. Sometimes you find them and they're like albino, or what we call a leucistic mutation, where the cap color is less than normal or completely non-existent. But if you're wondering about it and you're afraid, look for this striate margin on the edge of the cap. And then look for this hollow stipe. Cut one of them in half. And these do like to grow very close together, the Amanita ocreata and the Amanita villosa. So if you want to be really safe, check every single mushroom for this hollow stipe. There'll be a sort of like little like pith or like marshmallowy texture stuff inside of it. So yeah, those are really good mushrooms. I recommend eating them. They taste really nutty and sweet. They taste like spring to me. I've been eating them for a long time. So yeah, and then the Amanita ocreata, one thing about mushrooms that a lot of people don't know is you can actually taste any mushroom, even if it's deadly toxic, you just can't swallow it. So I've taken bites of these. If I had one with me, I'd do it in front of you. But you can take bites of these, chew them up to get the flavor, and then spit them out. You have to spit them out though, just to be safe, as these are incredibly toxic. So. Yeah. And then this is, you might have seen one of these. These are really common. This is Fomitopsis mountier, or a western red-belted conch. These are a saprophyte polypore mushroom. They grow on all sorts of different trees. They grow on deciduous trees, usually dead trees, but I have seen them on live trees on occasion. They're pretty easy to identify. For a long time, these were called Fomitopsis pinicola, but that's a European species, and when they did further DNA analysis on these species, they found out that North America has its own unique species. That's a common thing with mushrooms in America. We use a lot of European names because a lot of the evolutionary adaptations and the phenology, or the way that the mushrooms look, matches a lot of European mushrooms in some ways. And so they end up getting identified as a European species, but when you actually sequence the DNA, you find out that it's a different species and that it's actually undescribed, or maybe it's a mushroom that's undergoing description or something like that. So some people use these medicinally. In my opinion, the medicinal use of mushrooms is extremely hard to prove. There needs to be a lot more research on it, but it's really, really hard to do a study on this that's not biased, and it's really hard to be sure about it. But you know, if you think it's medicinal, if it makes you feel better, if it gives you some sort of like placebo effect, you feel better, then just go for it. Just maybe don't put all your faith in it, kind of thing. So, but these are very common.
Don't eat it, right? It's the.
I make tea. I honestly make tea out of them sometimes, not for the medicinal effect though, just because I think they taste kind of good. They're interesting.
Same family as chocolate, I think.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Faye.
So I found a big one growing on a tree the other day, and I wrote my name on the bottom because it does the brown stain. And then I came back a week later, and it was already it erased my name. So what is that process?
It's just new growth. It's just new growth. So as the mushroom grows, it'll overtake that little part that you drew your name in, and it'll just replace it with new hyphal threads. Yeah. Dylan.
Does that one also, when you brew the tea, does it taste like the orange peel, have an orangish?
Yeah, so another one thing, he brings up a great point. So with these, often you'll see little drops of liquid on the underside or even on the tops of them, and that's what we call an exudate or a guttation, and that's just the mushroom getting rid of excess moisture that it doesn't need. And if you actually lick the little water droplets on these, they taste kind of like citrus-y, like Dylan said. So they're good. So yeah. Any other questions about this one? And then, I think this is the final mushroom for the day. This is Latiparus gilbertsonii, or the western hardwood chicken of the woods, or the western hardwood sulfur shelf. This is a good edible mushroom. It does make some people have a gastrointestinal upset just based on how much chitin there is in it, and also based on sometimes what type of tree it's growing on. They grow on lots of different types of trees. They grow on eucalyptus, they grow on oak trees. In this case, it's growing on a European ash tree. They grow on, what was that other one? Sorry, I'm going nuts. They grow on a bunch of different trees, but they grow on only hardwood trees. So no conifer trees. We do have another species around here that's called Latiparus conifericola, and that one grows on conifer trees like pines. But I like these, they're good. I don't eat them a whole lot. When I do eat them, what I'll do is harvest them, dry them, and then I'll powderize them and make a seasoning out of them. Make a seasoning mix out of powderized chicken of the woods, garlic, pepper, salt, something simple like that. So they're good, and they're probably one of the easiest mushrooms to ID as a beginner. There's not really a lot of lookalikes for these, and if you do find a lookalike, it's going to be like a mustard yellow polypore. It's going to be so hard that you're not going to be able to eat it. These are really soft and fleshy, and if you do want to eat these, you just want to eat this outer leading edge. As they grow, the farther back the growth is, the harder it is, and so the harder it is to chew, and just the more tannins it develops from the trees. If you do find these on a eucalyptus tree, I would probably parboil them once, as some of the tannins in eucalyptus trees can be toxic mildly. So, yeah, I would go out and find these and experiment with them, see if you like them. They taste kind of like a lemony chicken, which is interesting, and they have a chicken texture as well. So now we're gonna do a little Q&A, and I'm done. Give me all your questions and say whatever you want to me.
I have two general questions.
Sure.
The first one is, when does growing season start and when is it dependent on? Is it air temperature, ground temperature, moisture content?
All of those factors come into play.
Okay.
So I'm a chronic watcher of the weather, and it's good to look at ground temps. There's a lot of good apps that are free on the App Store where you can look at ground moisture, ground temperature, using satellite imagery. So you can track it pretty closely. But if you're having a hard time finding mushrooms, it's good to hit zones where the habitat itself creates what we call a microclimate or a microenvironment. So say it's super hot in Mount Shasta, but there's a spring, a mountain spring where the humidity's higher and therefore the air's a little bit cooler. If it's August and you want to find mushrooms, I suggest going to a spring somewhere like that, if you want to find mushrooms.
And then the second question is, you had mentioned about over harvesting. Can you talk about like what is over harvesting?
It might be good. So like if you find like a rare species or something like that, like for instance, let me see if I can go back to it. Okay, like say I find this morel, this really rare, undescribed, well, we don't know if it's rare, but this undescribed mushroom, this undescribed morel, I would maybe take like a quarter of what's there, or maybe like just 2 of them or something. I wouldn't eat these if I were you. They need, sequencing work, they need more study. If you find these, definitely contact a mycologist or somebody on the internet and see if you can get it sequenced. If anybody has mushrooms here that you think are interesting, or if you find any this weekend, come to the Mount Shasta Mycological Society booth. I'm taking tons of samples for DNA sequencing, so if you want to discover a new species, you probably wouldn't be able to describe it yourself, because that's more left up to like a mycologist. But if you want to get the credit as a collector for finding a new species, it's really cool to be able to do that. So if you have cool mushrooms, bring them to me at my booth and I'll look at them and I'll try to ID them for you and see if we can get them sequenced.
What's the best book for local mushrooms around Mount Shasta?
Well, the author's in the room. Noah and Christian Schwartz. Is Christian here? No?
He's in the area.
He's in the area. But this book just came out. They wrote it. It's called Mushrooms of Cascadia. It was printed by Backcountry Press, and we actually do have some for sale at the Mount Shasta Mycological Society booth. If you'd like to buy one, we have some, and it's an incredible book. It's the Mushroom Bible of the Cascade Mountain Range, which extends from Mount Shasta all the way up into Washington.
How different is that from the mushrooms of the Redwood Coast that I already have?
It's very different. I mean, it's a different region. There's some overlap with the species, like you find Cantharellus subalbidus. Like you find this one in Mount Shasta, but you also find it on the coast too. So there's some overlap there, but there's a lot more to look at in that book, and I highly recommend buying it. Buy it from the Mount Shasta Mycological Society if you can, but if not, you can order it online or get one directly from the authors or whatever. So, yeah. Go for it.
I remember as a kid in my Russian textbook that it said that if you put a mushroom in water for 12 hours, if it sinks, it's poisonous, or if it floats, it's not. Have you ever heard of that?
That sounds like a wives' tale. That's kind of crazy.
What are your thoughts on mushroom coffee, like mud water and all that? Do you think that actually has some benefits?
Maybe. A lot of those companies, they use a myceliated rice grain, which if the complex polysaccharides in medicinal mushrooms actually do anything, they're probably more likely occurring in the fruiting body of the mushroom itself. And mud water and a lot of those companies like Rise, Mud Water, all them, no hate to them, but they use a lot of myceliated rice, which doesn't have like the same polysaccharide content. And like I said, it's extremely hard to prove that medicinal mushrooms are, functional, because these polysaccharide molecules, which are a lot of the medicinal mushrooms are touted as being medicinal based on the polysaccharide molecules in them, like with lion's mane. Those molecules are extremely large, and it's very hard for them to pass through the blood-brain barrier, and we kind of just don't know if that happens or not. So, and it's intensely hard to study. It would be great if we could know, but it's really difficult to know.
Do you have a type of bolette here in this region that is like super weird? I think it's like brown bolette or something. It's like you can't even eat it. It's like really weird.
Oh, the Calabolitus. Yeah, we have a couple different Calabolitus, and there's probably some undescribed ones. Those are what we call bitter boletes, and they have kind of like that scaly looking, like bumpy, pale looking cap to them, and they stain red at the bottom of the stipe.
To identify it as a red in the bottom, you said?
So at the bottom of the stipe, there will be like some red flushing, and if you look at this mushroom, which is the butter bolete, they kind of look similar. They both have this yellow flesh, and they both stain blue, but as you can see with this one, it doesn't have any sort of red staining here or red blushing at the bottom. So that's a good way to identify those from each other.
How big is that?
Yeah, I probably should have used something for scale, shouldn't I? That's a 3 cluster. I would guess it's probably about like this big. Yeah.
Speaking of lion's mane, so is lion's mane out here right now?
I find lion's mane down by Shasta Lake. It grows on the black oaks, but I don't find it super often around here. But it's around. It's around. It's good to focus on the microclimates, like I said, for those because they require a lot of moisture and a lot of fresh air exchange. So go near lakes and rivers, Sacramento River, if you want to find those. I like to eat those; they taste good. I don't know about the medicinal content, but
I've never been hunting for mushrooms, right?
Right.
If I go and I find some, take a picture of it, okay, that's edible, and then cut it or plug it, and then what do? What's the process of cleaning it? Do I put it in the fridge? Do I set it out to dry?
So it's good to have a mushroom knife with you, or maybe like a paintbrush or something like that. So like, this one's pretty dirty, right? So like, say I find this one, it might be good to brush it off, maybe cut off the bottom of the stipe because a lot of these boletes have like dirt inside the flesh. So cut off the bottom, brush it off with a paintbrush as much as you can. Maybe run some water over it. I rinse mushrooms, but very lightly, because if you leave mushrooms in water for a long time, they just soak it up, and then it's just harder to get it out of them later when you're cooking them.
Okay. Okay.
But it's good to use like a basket or a paper bag or a plastic bag or something like that.
Okay.
To carry them around.
And then bruising them doesn't matter in terms of eating them, right?
No.
Okay.
Nope. Makes no difference. You could, I mean, with the chanterelles, I make like a pasta sauce with them, and I'll take them and cook them, and then I'll just put them in the blender and blend them up. Like, you can do whatever you want with a mushroom. It's up to you.
Cool. Thanks.
What about
Mushrooms are for everybody.
oyster mushrooms around here?
Yeah, there's some oyster mushrooms. So the funny thing about oyster mushrooms is a lot of those cultivated varieties are like Pleurotus austriatus or Pleurotus citronopiliatus. And those are not species that occur here. And a lot of people don't know this, but oyster mushrooms in particular are very, very diverse. And there's many, many species that are undocumented in California and all over the world. So if you wanted to cultivate your own oyster, it might be good to send like a sample to a mycologist and get him to run like a culture for you, make like a liquid culture if you were going to cultivate them at home. But I find oyster mushrooms around here sometimes. But it's really difficult to tell what species at all. You need to get them DNA sequenced.
Are they all edible?
Yeah, all Pleurotus are edible.
So without getting into too much detail, the
Sure.
DNA sequencing you guys talk about,
Mhm.
it sounds like it's an easy thing to do, and I would think it's totally complex.
Depends on like your version of easy, you know? Depends on what you think easy means. So basically what happens is you send in a mushroom for DNA sequencing, right? And say you have a tissue sampler. They take like a tiny little piece of the gill and they put it in a well with some chemicals, some reagent chemicals, and then they'll superheat it for a long time in this thing called a PCR or a thermocycler, and then it'll cool all the way down, and then you take that product out and then you put it into this thing called a nanopore reader, and the little strands of DNA get separated from the cells, and then they flow through that flow cell in the nanopore, and then that's connected to a computer, and the computer is able to read the barcode from there, and then that's the DNA barcode of the ITS gene, which is what most people use for DNA sequencing. So you take that gene, and then you do this thing called, what is it called? You do this thing called, sorry, I'm blanking here. Barcode validation. You do this thing called barcode validation, where you plug in your barcodes into a. Ready?
I'm going to take the computer.
Let's go for it. Go for it. Thanks, Noah.
So it is really easy.
I mean, it's really easy to get a mushroom DNA sequence as a collector because you can send anything in free to my Coda lab, which is it's a DNA sequencing lab that's in it's in Michigan, and you just have to have an associated iNaturalist observation number that you send in with it, and they will sequence that DNA for you and then add it to the observation so you can see later what species it was.
So the whole process takes like 20 minutes then?
No, it takes like multiple days.
Oh, okay.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, but if you have multiple people working on the process, it doesn't take that long.
Thank you.
So,
That's
yeah.
good, thanks.
One more question.
Sure.
What about concentration of toxins in polluted areas?
Okay, that's a great question. So, anybody who's still listening, she asked about mushroom toxins, or just general environmental toxins being leached into mushrooms and whether or not that affects their edibility. So most mushrooms are really bad at picking up heavy metals and bad chemicals and toxins. They're usually pretty bad at it because they're just not designed to do that sort of thing. But there is a genus called Lacaria, or the deceivers, and they're very common. They're a mycorrhizal mushroom, and they associate with over 150 different plant species. So they're very common. They're everywhere. They're little pink mushrooms. They have pink gills or purple gills. They're about that tall. They grow all over the ground, and those can be good at picking up heavy metals. So if you find one near a road or something, Lacaria is a genus that's really good at doing that. My friend Alan Rockefeller did a test a little bit ago where he took a bunch of mushroom samples and he took a Geiger counter that reads radiation to see if they had picked up any like really, really heavy chemicals, any radioactive chemicals, and he, put them around the box and none of them were radioactive. There was just background radiation noise, nothing like that. So watch out for Lacaria deceivers, deceiver mushrooms. But other than that, mushrooms are pretty bad at picking up toxic chemicals. Plants are a lot better at that because they soak up the water.